In Turkey, vote counting is underway in Sunday's general elections. In Palestine, the foreign ministry called for international action to stop the killing in the Gaza Strip after a 5-day siege by the Israeli regime. And in Senegal, citizens took to the streets to demonstrate against President Macky Sall's intention to run for a third term in office. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Turkey, with more than 80% of participation closed the electoral journey. In the next hours, the electoral body will issue a first preliminary bulletin of the results. The more than 50,000 polling stations set up for a day of presidential and parliamentary elections throughout the Eurasian country closed their doors at 5 p.m. local time to start counting the votes. The main candidates for the presidency of the country are the current president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who aspires to a new mandate, and his main contender is the leader of the Republican People's Party, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. According to the electoral schedule, it is expected that around 7 p.m. local time, the first indications about the results will be given, which will be announced around midnight, while the official announcement will be made on Friday, May 19th. Turks leave their country's election day with enthusiasm and reaffirm the importance of voting.
We are enthusiastic. The election campaign was strong. Neither side gave up their job. This is an election for a big change. I think this is going to be very positive for our country.
What is important in this election is not to divide Turkey. I hope it will continue like this. Everyone is trying to make a living. There's nothing else to do. We will do our duty.
President Recep Erdogan made a statement on Twitter. On his account, the president said, "Dear fellow travelers and friends, the voting process has concluded throughout our country in a way consistent with our democracy," said the president on Twitter. Thanks to God. Now, as usual, is the time to hold on the ballot boxes until the results are final. We continue to protect the will of our nation, said the president on Twitter after the end of the voting process. In the United Kingdom, workers at 14 road operators shut down to demand wage adjustments in line with inflation. Workers are carrying out the strike as a measure of strength after rejecting a 5% pay raise offered as insufficient, and claim they will continue their movement until the government unblocks their pay dispute on the second consecutive day of cancellations of hundreds of journeys in the UK hinterland. The Royal Delivery Group has called on passengers to plan their journeys before they travel because there will be few train services. In recent months, different sectors such as doctors, nurses, and postal workers have gone on strike to demand higher wages due to the rising cost of living, as the British year-on-year inflation stands at 10.1%. The G7 plans to launch a partnership plan to diversify supply chains to reduce dependence on trade with China. Following talks between G7 finance chiefs in the coastal city of Niigata, Japanese Finance Minister Junichi Suzuki said that during the pandemic, there were problems with supply chains being too concentrated in one place. Suzuki added that lower income and middle income countries could take on a bigger role and benefit from this. Although the ministers did not directly mention reducing their relations with China and Russia, they focused on a new framework for clean energy relations. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen noted the recent disruptions in the global economy and the importance of a diversified and resilient supply chains. At the end of the financial negotiations on Saturday, the ministers reaffirmed their commitment to the sanctions against Russia and affirmed that they are working together to enforce them, but did not announce any new concrete measures to address sanctions evasion. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Russia, the defense ministry denounced the use by Ukrainian forces of long-range missiles against civilian targets in the Donbas region. The missiles were provided to Ukraine by the United Kingdom, which was the first country to deliver this type of projectile.
On 12 May, at around 6 p.m. Moscow time, Ukrainian Air Force aircraft carried out a missile strike on the polymer product company Polypak and the meat processing plant Milan in the city of Luhansk. Storm Shadow air-to-air missiles supplied to the Kiev regime by Great Britain were used for the strike, despite London's declaration that these weapons would not be used against civilian targets. As a result of the strike, a fire broke out on the territory of Luhansk's food and chemical industry factories. There is damage to nearby residential buildings. Civilians were injured, including 6 children.
After 5 days of siege by the Israeli regime, the Palestinian Foreign Minister demanded international action to stop the carnage in the Gaza Strip. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs regretted the silence of the international community after 5 days of assault against the Palestinian land and demanded on Saturday a firm international position in order to halt the Israeli attacks. Through a document, the Foreign Ministry also denounced the violation of international law due to the refusal of Tel Aviv to allow the entrance of assistant medical supplies and food to the besieged Gaza Strip. The United Nations expressed its concern over the fighting in Gaza and the disruption of aid inflows. According to medical reports, since Tuesday, May 9th, 33 Palestinians have been killed, including 6 children and 3 women, and the Israeli military operation has left at least 150 wounded. In Senegal, citizens took to the streets to demonstrate their rejection of President Macky Sall's refusal to rule out seeking a third term in office. Groups of citizens mobilized on the streets of Dakar, the country's capital, in response to a call for demonstrations carried out by a group called Movement of Senegal's Living Forces F24, referring to the election date scheduled for February 24, 2024. Demonstrators expressed their rejection of Sall's refusal to rule out running for a third term as president, a measure they claim would be unconstitutional. In this sense, they asked him to leave power while demanding the release of over 300 political prisoners.
We came here to liberate Senegal, to tell Macky Sall that he has to stop his dictatorial path. He only has to release the political prisoners. We are fed up. We don't want him anymore. We tell him enough. He only has to leave for Senegal. We want peace. We don't want problems with anyone.
We came to heed the call of the F24 coalition. We have 3 principles to fight for: to say no to Macky Sall's third candidacy, to demand the release of political prisoners, and to ask Macky Sall to stop eliminating his opponents who want to participate in the election. This is our struggle, and we are motivated to go all the way.
On Sunday, Sudan's warring parties will resume talks in the port city of Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. The aim is to create plans to deliver humanitarian aid and withdraw forces from civilian areas. Sudanese authorities announced the readiness of Khartoum and Wadi Sidna airports, as well as Port Sudan's harbor, to receive humanitarian assistance. On the other hand, the Sudanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemned the holding of a special session of the Human Rights Council, where it discussed the exceptional circumstances in that African nation. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said the protection and development of human rights in Sudan is a national issue of great importance and is at the top of the state's priorities. For the last month, the army and the rapid support forces have been fighting fierce battles, leaving over 750 people dead, more than 5,000 injured, and over 900,000 displaced. More news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the South. U.S. President Joe Biden welcomed Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez to the White House, where they discussed several topics as Spain takes on the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union in July. Sánchez told Biden that Spain has many objectives, including reindustrializing the European Union and strengthening the region's ties with Latin America, as part of the world where Spain and the U.S. have common interests in democracy, prosperity, and safe, regular, and ordered migratory routes. The White House assured that both leaders pledged to deepen the economic cooperation of the American continent through the Inter-American Development Bank. In the bilateral agenda, they discussed another issue that has been on the table for some time, the transfer of the plutonium-contaminated land in Palomares, where 4 U.S. nuclear bombs were dropped 57 years ago. At the end of the meeting at the White House with President Biden, the president of the Spanish government, Pedro Sánchez, addressed the press.
I believe that both governments agree and have a very similar vision on how to deal with the fight against illegal migration, and I believe that the best way to build a regular, orderly migratory system respectful of the human rights and migrants, and therefore against the mafias that traffic and gamble with the lives of many human beings, both in America and in Africa in their transit to Europe, is to promote positive incentive to legal migration. We also talked about the digital revolution, artificial intelligence, digital rights, and energy transformation linked to climate change. I think the two governments are very much aligned on everything that has to do with climate goals.
In Sao Paulo, at least 50,000 people are homeless, and the Conservative mayor's office is carrying out repressive policies against this sector of the population in response in homeless people and human rights organizations protested in front of the City Hall. A correspondent, Ignacio Lemos, is there with the details.
Winter is coming, and Sao Paulo's mayor's office, led by conservative Ricardo Nunes, is not providing solutions to the city's housing crisis. Quite the contrary.
They are taking away the floats. They are taking away the tents of the homeless people, taking away their documents, clothes, medicines. There is an extreme violence and elimination process. On top of that, the governor of the state of Sao Paulo wanted to take the population to the countryside to work on fields, which will be slave labor.
With record cash on hand, the mayor's office of a capital with the country's largest gross domestic product cut back on long-standing initiatives to protect the vulnerable population on the streets.
What Bolsonaro and his supporters left behind were people on the streets, going hungry, freezing to death, people with no rights, education, culture, or housing. So we are in a very vulnerable situation, and the City Hall is not solving it. I filed a protocol with the Public Prosecutor's Office about the City Hall closing a tent downtown during the low-temperature operation.
Official numbers from Sao Paulo warn about a crisis with 50,000 people living on the streets, but human rights organizations claim that real numbers might be even more shocking.
Mayor Ricardo Nunes is destroying the social assistance service and has put in place a policy of removing the tents from the homeless population, and that will generate a gigantic level of barbarism. We know that the cold period will start now in the city. The tents help people not to die frozen on the streets, and what can happen is a tragedy much worse than in the last few years with the cold wave that we will have in the middle of the year.
After marching from the City Hall to the municipal chamber, hundreds of homeless people, communities and human rights organizations were left waiting for urgent solutions for the vulnerable population on the streets of Sao Paulo.
Ignacio Lemos y Julia Nassif para TeleSUR.
In Brazil, the Landless Rural Workers Movement celebrates the third day of the National Agrarian Reform Fair. The activity promotes the importance of land distribution to ensure people's food security. This is the main event of dialogue between the Landless Rural Workers Movement and the population of the cities in Brazil. It takes place in the Whitewater Park in the city of Sao Paulo. It was inaugurated on Thursday, May 11th, after 5 years, and it is attended by around 1,200 vendors with 500 tons of food grown in settlements and camps in 23 Brazilian states. The meeting marks the beginning of the celebrations for the 40th anniversary of the Landless Rural Workers Movement, which was founded in January 1984. It is a way of presenting society not only the agrarian reform model defended by the organization, but also that which it produces in practice and whose architects run the risk of being evicted. We have come to the end of this newspaper. You can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSUR English. You can also join us on our social medias on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.